I just heard the best description of the modern plantation from Dinesh D'Souza. I couldn't have laid it out any better. As you're listening to this, remember when AOC didn't want Amazon to come to New York City? Something that Charles Barkley, the basketball player, commented on, and he's talking about the present, not about the past. A very interesting parable. Barkley goes, I've been noticing that poor people have been voting for the Democratic Party for 50 years, and they're still poor. Now what's he getting at? I think what he's saying is that what we have seen in Detroit, St. Louis, and in Baltimore, in the inner cities of this country. A kind of revival of the old. Well, it's a new form of the old plantation, and what I mean by that is if you think of the plantation as people living in complete dependency. They can't get off the plantation. Now they get their basic provisions on the plantation, but it's very meager, but nevertheless it's enough to sustain you, and you're there and you're stuck. Now, I'm not saying that the inner city is the same, obviously it's not the same, people aren't being forced to work against their will. In fact, a lot of them aren't working, but there is a certain kind of frozenness to the plantation, and what I notice is very bizarre and very telling is that when there are efforts to change the plantation they are vigorously fought by progressives and progressive Democrats. So for example, in a lot of inner cities now, there are these gentrification movements in which yuppies come in with technology companies and they say, all right, you know what we're going to do, we're going to put in all these new buildings, we're going to create all these new jobs, we're going to open Starbucks, we're going to create all this enterprise, and we're going to make this into a kind of enterprise zone of productivity and prosperity, and we're also going to pay money to the people who are in there now. So they can move elsewhere or stay here, and if they stay here there will be more jobs and better food, and we're going to clean up the place, and crime rates will go down. Progressive Democrats will inevitably mobilize and fight desperately to block these gentrification schemes. More jobs, more prosperity, less crime, safer neighborhoods. What's not to like? And if you have to move, your property values have gone up already enormously, so you can sell and cash out and move where you want. But no, you have to fight these progressive Democrats. Why? Because you can't disrupt the plantation. The plantation has its uses. There are different forms of exploitation. If you have figured out a way to create a political class that you depend on politically, that's delivering 90% of its votes to you, and if any of those guys got jobs and moved out they would no longer be beholden to you. That's not a very good situation, and it bears an uncanny resemblance to the policies of the past. The name of that political class? The victims of the Democratic playing card deck. This group makes up the core of the voting element as far as the Democratic Party goes, and thus helps the most to promote the leftist cause. These are the people who think they've been wrong or disadvantaged, or have been told that they've been wronged or disadvantaged, by politicians or by academia, the intellectual left. They're also being told that the opposing party are out to wrong them and disadvantage them even further. These are the things commonly referred to as playing the race, age, gender, or class card. This is used the most by liberals, so get ready to hear a lot of it. It works, it is effective, and this second group of people, the victims, fall for it very easily. As a result, they become slaves of the liberal mindset. Pun intended. Look no further than how the progressive Democrats try to scare African Americans into believing that conservatives are holding them down, how the progressive Democrats try to scare middle-class Americans into thinking conservatives are hurting the middle class, and how the progressive Democrats try to scare women into thinking conservatives are against their rights. Progressive Democrats also frequently try to scare senior citizens into thinking conservatives want to destroy Social Security. Look at the key words mentioned in these accusations: against, holding down, hurting, destroying. In essence, it is fear-mongering targeted at certain groups of people in society, and it works. These progressive Democrats and leftists attempt to spin the issues into backing up this fear-mongering, and people listen to it. And as a result, this entire second group is formed, the victims of the Democratic playing card deck. These people often do not know much about the issues, especially as far as fact and reality goes. What they do think they know, however, is that conservatives are completely against them and trying to hold them down, or their issue in general. They believe the way they do because of the total spin and fear-mongering they hear from progressive Democrat leaders. They then go out and vote for these said progressive Democrats, and become strong leftists, mostly out of fear and loathing of the other side, values instilled into them. Furthermore, they become very likely to start calling conservatives bigots and racists, because of the lies that the liberal left has drilled into their heads. And yet, they'll remain just as poor, nothing will change, and they'll probably die on the progressive Democrat plantation.